My next guest was among those who testified at today's hearing. He is the president of the State Bar Association, Vincent Doyle. Mr. Doyle, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Nick.
So let's talk a little bit about the testimony that you gave today. The State Bar Association's position in this judicial compensation issue is that you guys favor a pay bump, essentially, for all judges, the base being $192,000. How do you sell this with the public right now?
Well, what we did today is we submitted testimony and a written report, including a report from an expert economist that we had hired. We wanted to be able to make sure that we had a workable, reasonable, economically sound analysis to offer to the Commission. And what we found is that judges, because their salaries have not been adjusted in any way since 1999, have essentially lost more than $300,000 over that time period between 1999 and today. Most professions, most of us who work have had some adjustment of our salary in those years. They have had none in over 12 and a half years. So our testimony, and the essence of our testimony today, was that judges should receive a cost of living adjustment from 1999 to next year when the Salary Commission's recommendations will go into effect, of at least accounting for the cost of living changes, which our economist predicts or calculates would be up to a level of $192,000 for Supreme Court judges, with proportional adjustments for other types of judges.
Okay, I can see two sides to this right now. Sure. The first side being this is a highly technical, highly skilled, white-collar profession where you want to attract the best and the brightest. But at the same time, you've got an economic recession. You've got a lot of people who are either out of work or whose wages have been stagnant in the last couple of years if they haven't gone down. How difficult does that make your argument, though, to sell to people saying that judges need a $60,000, that the lowest level of judges needs a $60,000 pay raise?
Sure. Well, you have to look at a couple things. First of all, hard times make for hard cases and hard times for the judicial system. When we have hard economic times, we see an increase in the number of filings. We've also seen a decrease in the judicial budget for non-judicial salaries and other aspects of the budget. So judges are doing more of the work without help from, for example, judicial hearing officers or clerks, all of which have been cut or reduced because of the budget problems. So judges are doing more work over this time. The other thing you have to consider is over the past 13 years, judges have seen no adjustment of their salary at all. And we've had good economic times and bad economic times during those 13 years. But judges, have borne the brunt, and they have suffered during that time by having no adjustment at all. Our recommendation is for a cost of living adjustment, which really would merely return them to where they were in 1999 in terms of pure purchasing power. So it's not really a raise, it's a return of where they were economically in 1999. And we further recommend that their salaries be further adjusted for cost of living going into the future. Now that means if there are good times, they'll be adjusted upwards. If there are bad times, they'll be adjusted less or perhaps theoretically be adjusted downwards. But they should be tied to the cost of living like most other jobs are in the public and private sector.
Now, the New York Law Journal today carried a story quoting Bill Thompson, the former New York City comptroller who's leading this Judicial Pay Commission. We should also say that he's a possible 2013 mayoral contender in New York City. But he suggested that there could be gradual pay increases, or as you call them, cost of living adjustments, over the next several years. What's your position on that and your response?
Well, first of all, interestingly, Chair Thompson started the hearing by commenting that don't believe everything you read. So some of us in the audience thought that was a comment directly on that information.
The story was incorrect, or that he was misquoted?
He didn't say that directly, but he said don't believe everything you read, and I believe it was in reference to that. That was my belief sitting in the audience. But second of all, in terms of phasing in a type of adjustment, first of all, it's been 13 years. Judges deserve to have a fair salary, a reasonable salary now. They shouldn't have to wait further. In addition, the minuscule savings that you would see by phasing it in over 2 or 3 or 4 years really doesn't make sense economically. And again, we're not talking about a raise. If we were talking about, in an economic sense, an actual raise, an increase in their salary, an increase in their purchasing power, that's something that you probably would want to phase in. Or if we were talking about some retroactivity, in other words, giving them something to compensate for the 13 years they've had nothing, that's something, again, you would probably phase in from an economic standpoint. Our economists told us that in order to return them to where they were in 1999, it has to be an immediate raise and to the cost of living index that exists in 2012.
Mm-hmm. And we should also go back to 1999, when the last time judges received a pay increase. That was when, and it was a process that had been in place for years, where the legislature would receive a pay increase along with the judiciary. These two issues were essentially linked, which is kind of a classic Albany way of doing business. The initial thought was that by creating this commission, it kind of depoliticized the effort to give judges pay increases, especially since legislators, given their reputation, probably would not be getting a pay increase anytime soon. Is the process been depoliticized, though, or is there still some complicated work involved here?
Well, we hope so, and we certainly, the State Bar, opposed for years the idea of tying judicial salaries to any other issue, whether that be legislative salaries or, in more recent times, campaign finance reform or government ethics reform. All of those, are legitimate issues, but they shouldn't be. The judicial salary shouldn't be tied to that. That's counter to the concept of an independent judiciary, which is one of the branches of our government. The commission seems to be working. It's something we advocated for, and we commended the governor and the legislature when they passed the commission. We'll wait to see what the recommendations are, and then what the legislature does with that. They do have the authority to abrogate or change or modify the recommendations, so we'll have to see what happens. But we have advocated for years for the type of commission that was created, so we hope that will depoliticize the issue.
Mm-hmm. And in the whole issue of attracting the best and the brightest to do this job, the New York Times had a story a few weeks ago, I believe, on the lack of judges entering, or the lack of attorneys entering the judiciary, some even leaving it. What's your response to that? And two, how big of a problem is this? Are there competent people being attracted to this job?
Well, first of all, I'd start by saying we have the best judiciary, state judiciary in the entire country. In fact, we have a national and international reputation for having a wonderful, high-quality judiciary. But, the issue is the further we devalue and the further we send a signal that we don't value attracting the best and the brightest to the judiciary, we put that in peril. So I would comment that every lawyer in the state, if you ask them, knows of judges who have either left the bench or knows high-quality lawyers out there who would be wonderful judges who have decided not to run for the bench because of the salary stagnation. So I think it's a growing problem, one that going forward has to be addressed in order to ensure that we continue to attract the best and the brightest, which we need to make the judiciary run. Okay, we've got about a minute left, but first I just want to ask you before we leave, you've been head of the Bar Association for a little bit over a month now. Correct.
What's your take on Chief Judge Jonathan Littman, the Court of Appeals Chief Judge?
Yeah. Well, we think he's doing a wonderful job. Of course, for years he was the chief administrative judge of the state, so I don't think there's anyone in the state who knows the state court system or the judiciary branch of the government better than Judge Littman. And we've had a wonderful working relationship with him. We think the lawyers in the state, through the bar associations, including ours, and the bench, should be working together to improve the judicial system.
Okay. New York State Bar Association President Vincent Doyle, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Nick.